Welcome to Bleacher Report's NFL Daily. I'm Mitch, and I'm here with a vibe check. Teams flying high after free agency, entering the NFL draft. And which teams, not so much. Those teams, they're down in the dumps. They really need to turn it around during the NFL draft. And there's some teams that I'm a little confused about. They're in the middle. Maybe they had some things go right, some things go wrong. They're fairly neutral. So we're going to break down the immaculate vibes. We're going to break down the horrific vibes and everything in between in this video. Let me know in the chat what you guys think. Which teams do you think are flying high and which teams do you think are down in the dumps? Let me know in the chat. Let's get to it, guys. We're going to start it off with the teams that are flying high, the good vibe teams in the NFL. And the best way to start every video is by talking about my New England Patriots. There's no denying, whether you love them or hate them, that the Patriots have had arguably the best offseason of any football team when it comes to adding talent, getting better as a football team, and providing positive vibes. First things first is they maybe had the biggest upgrade among all coaching staffs in the NFL. They went from Gerard Mayo, a man that had never coached a game and had never been a defensive play caller, to one of the most talented head coaches in recent seasons in the NFL. Mike Vrabel is now the Patriots head coach. He's going to bring a strong, tough culture, and I think he's going to bring maturity back to the sidelines. The Patriots are going to play much more detailed football than they did a year ago. He brought in a couple nice names, including Josh McDaniels on the offensive side of the football, to bring back, again, maturity to the offensive play calling, good maturity to Drake May. Drake May's ability to get the most out of him in his sophomore season. And Josh McDaniels, remember what he did with Mac Jones? I mean, that was pretty impressive. So imagine what he can do with a talent like Drake May, also allowing Josh Jacobs to lead the NFL in rushing one season. Then you look at all the other additions they made on the roster. You're talking about Carlton Davis to be a nice number 2 corner to Christian Gonzalez, right? Carlton Davis, excellent in terms of press man coverage, in terms of that ability to be physical, get in the face of wide receivers. He is a Super Bowl champion with Tom Brady's Buccaneers, and he will be a steady leadership force in the secondary for the Patriots. Robert Spillane, this guy's been one of the most underrated linebackers in the NFL. Spillane, he's going to be the leader of the middle, calling the shots of the defense. He's going to provide a new leader as Jawan Bentley has moved on from New England. And the interesting thing with a lot of these signings that Mike Vrabel has done and this front office, Elliott Wolf and the Patriots have made, is they've decided to go in a different direction with many of their leaders. They've moved on from guys like Jonathan Jones. They've moved on from names like Dietrich Wise and Dave Andrews. And that is on purpose, in my opinion. They want to get rid of the Bill Belichick era Patriots, and they want to establish something new, something fresh. So he brings in, his Harold Landry to not only set the edge and get to the quarterback, a multi-10 sacks man in the NFL, but also to lead and to show the way of the Mike Vrabel program. You've got guys like Epps and Hollins, who are captains for Josh McDaniels' Raiders. You bring in Morgan Moses, an established NFL veteran at right tackle, who's actually going to be much better than what they had at that position last year. He helps the offensive line. Then you have Milton Williams. Milton Williams was the big ticket item of free agency, arguably the best player in free agency. He's going to be one of the best interior pass rushers. He was last year. He was in the top 3 in terms of that pressure ability, especially in the playoffs, only behind Jalen Carter, Milton Williams in the playoffs last year to get to the quarterback. So Patriots have done a ton to impact their front seven, their secondary, their offense, their offensive line. And then they cap it off with Stephon Diggs, who's going to bring energy and a reliable target for Drake May. Stephon Diggs can still play, Before his injury last year, he was on pace for over 100 receptions. So he's going to be a guy that Drake May did not have as a rookie. Somebody that can move the chains, somebody that can get open, somebody that can separate and move around the formation and be a game changer, or at least a guy that can be reliable and has produced in the NFL. The Patriots have not had that guy since they got rid of Jacoby Myers. And really, they have not had an 1,000-yard receiver since late Julian Edelman. So late career Julian Edelman, I should clarify there. So they still need to find maybe another receiver and definitely a left tackle. But they do have the 4th overall pick in the NFL draft. So the Patriots, with their high pick, should be able to get a great football player, whether it be Travis Hunter, whether it be Abdul Carter on the edge, which they could still use a little pass rush, or a left tackle like Will Campbell. The Patriots are going to secure a well-rounded, awesome offseason that could really catapult them from one of the worst teams in football last year, disorganized and untalented, to a playoff team if Drake May breaks out in the right way with new leadership by Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels. So the Patriots, definitely good vibes, the fan base, the team all around. Now, the Chicago Bears are another team that I thought had immaculate vibes so far this offseason, and they're riding high. Why? Because Bears fans can finally say that they are protecting the quarterback. Bears fans can finally, to themselves feel confident about the protection for Caleb Williams. That's first and foremost. You've got Joe Thuney, arguably, in my opinion, personally, the best guard in football over the last 5 years. If you're looking at consistency, if you're looking at a championship pedigree, if you're looking at leadership, toughness, consistency of being available on the field, pass blocking, Joe Thuney has been at the pinnacle of the sport. And I know that he's a guard, so he doesn't get that love, but this is a future Hall of Famer that's been a part of 2 dynasties, guys. So Joe Thuney is an incredible pickup from the Kansas City Chiefs. They pick up Jonah Jackson, who's familiar with their coach, Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson being maybe the biggest reason to be optimistic about this team. The NFL's best play caller the last 2 seasons in the NFL is now combined with what we thought was a generational talent in Caleb Williams. If anyone is going to maximize Caleb Williams, it's going to be Ben Johnson through his approach, his creativity, his play action pass ability, that balance that he'll bring to the offense, and just the kind of arrogant side to his play calling, the trick plays, right? The constant, last year, the Lions just kept running up the score. That would be big for Caleb Williams' confidence, but Jackson fits right in there, being his most successful in Detroit 2 seasons ago, which landed him a contract with the Rams. Good caliber guard. Then in the middle, you add the best center on the market, Drew Dahlman, who's very athletic, can execute everything that a Frank Ragnow did in Detroit. So love that support for Caleb up front to protect him. Then you still have the 10th overall pick to utilize. Are they going to be able to land Ashton Genty, another playmaker for their offense? Will they go with the offensive line or maybe even boost the defensive front, which they did already this offseason with a couple nice names, including Grady Jarrett, who's going to provide some leadership, toughness, and also a guy that's motivated. From the Falcons to the Bears, they increased their depth on the defensive front. Overall, there's really very small areas where they got worse. I would also look at Dennis Allen being their defensive coordinator now as a huge bonus, because I feel like when Dennis Allen is a defensive coordinator, he's a very good coach. When he's a head coach, he's not so good. He's like the defensive version of Josh McDaniels. So that is also a huge bonus. I mean, now you talk about Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen and that combination, that might be one of the strongest on both sides of the football in the entire NFL. So the Bears have immaculate good vibes. Now, the final team that I think is riding high, has good vibes. And guys, there were a lot of teams, especially for the good vibes teams. I could have went with a lot of different choices here, but I really like what the Giants have done this offseason, right? The New York Giants are feeling like Giants right now. They've been feeling small over the last couple of years, but now that they've fixed some of their biggest deficiencies from last year, I think they're feeling a lot more confident entering this draft. Because first of all, whether you think Russell Wilson is washed or not, Russell Wilson is better than Daniel Jones was last year. That's a fact. Whether you think Jameis Winston is simply a meme or actually kind of good at football, Jameis Winston, not only does he bring incredible vibes, incredible personality, probably the most entertaining quarterback in all of football for my money, especially when it comes to pregame and postgame interviews. But Jameis Winston is also better than Tommy DeVito. That's a fact. So either way, at quarterback, they're getting better. They have an established Super Bowl champion and future Hall of Famer, and one of the best personalities in all of football to fall back on at the quarterback position. There's also an opportunity that they might add another quarterback in the draft, even if it's not at number 3. Maybe they go with a developmental prospect later in the draft. Then you look at what they did on defense, and this is what I'm talking about with fixing their biggest flaws. The secondary last year, besides the quarterback position for the Giants, was the biggest reason they stunk last season. They couldn't cover a soul down the field. They add Javon Holland, the rangiest, fastest, most aggressive safety in terms of physicality and speed in football. He has an incredible combination. He's one of the best true free safeties roaming the field in the NFL. Javon Holland is a great athlete in his prime that is going to be added to this defense. They didn't replace McKinney last year, and it showed on the field. And now they finally have with a guy that can really roam and make plays across sideline to sideline. So I love that addition. Paulson Adebo being one of my favorite corners in free agency this year. Great in man coverage, very aggressive. I think he's super underrated. He actually made the second all-pro team for Bill Belichick. You know, Bill Belichick doesn't have official voting, but Bill Belichick was watching the NFL closely, and he's very good with defensive backs. So if he has you on the list, I think you're pretty good at football. Just going to throw that out there. So Paulson Adebo, Javon Holland, 2 young defensive backs in their prime, at their peak, added to a defense that couldn't cover anyone last year. That's going to fix a lot of issues for that secondary. I also like the additions of Chauncey Golston and Roy Robertson-Harris up front, 2 underrated names that will give them some size and some flexibility and some depth to their front 7 to add to Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, and everybody up front. They have the 3rd pick. So with the 3rd pick, you know, you've got a lot of opportunity here to provide some entertainment to your football team. You got Abdul Carter as a possibility. You've got Travis Hunter, I think, is the largest possibility here. And also, you could go with a quarterback if you still want to, if you like Sanders, if that's your choice, right? You could go that direction, right? So really with the Giants, you have a much more entertaining short term with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, and you have a very fun long-term possibility with this offseason that they've established. Imagine Malik Neighbors and Travis Hunter together. That would be crazy. That would be like the best, most exciting combination of players they've had since Odell and Saquon. So, yeah, I think the Giants just added a lot of entertainment to their team, and I think it will lead to more winning, especially with the quarterback upgrades. I did want to include the Broncos on my list just to shout them out real quickly. You know, they couldn't fit on the graphic, but I wanted to include the Broncos just because I think what they did with their defense with Hufanga and Greenlaw, it was, you know, great moves for them. And I think that will add even more to Vance Joseph's defense. 2 guys that fly around and bring energy every Sunday. And then Sean Payton adding his Joker playmaker and Evan Ingram's really going to help Bo Nix elevate in year 2. So I like what the Broncos did as well. Now moving to the teams with neutral vibes this offseason. Teams that kind of on the fence. I understand what they did, but at the same time, I feel like I think they could have done more. I think that's the best way to put it. I'm not exactly sold on their plan. So the first team is the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans, they're interesting. Or okay, we'll go with the Chiefs. That's on the graphic. The Chiefs are actually in the wrong category, I think. So on the graphic, I have them in the bad vibes. We'll get to them. But the neutral tier, I've got the Houston Texans, and the Houston Texans, I feel like bad offensive line, but crazy good defense. And that's kind of what I want to talk about here with the Houston Texans is they made decisions to get less expensive on the offensive line after a unit that underperformed, a unit that didn't play very well last year, despite having a left tackle like Laramie Tunsil. They still underperformed. So they get rid of Laramie Tunsil. And what they decided to do was everybody panicked, right? On social media, everyone's like, what happened? Why are they getting rid of Tunsil? Why are they releasing Shaq Mason? Why are they cutting all these players? And it's like, well, okay, that's interesting. They go about their business and they trade away Kenyon Green and they add CJ Gardner-Johnson, which I think fulfills one of their biggest holes that they had on defense last year. and they go and they add Cam Robinson to left tackle to hopefully replace a guy like Laramie Tunzel. Inconsistent but talented Cam Robinson. Some would say the same about Tunzel with all the penalties he took. They also added inconsistent but talented Trent Brown. Again, inconsistent but talented. Guy was injured last year, but has played at a very high level at right and left tackle in his NFL career before. So he brings an interesting addition to that offensive line. They also trade for Ingram from the Vikings. Again, former pretty high draft pick. Kind of swap him out for Kenyon Green. They add a veteran stabilizer in somebody like Laken Tomlinson. Laken Tomlinson, a player that played for Seattle last year, has played for San Francisco, played for the Jets. Hasn't played great in recent years, but he's going to at least provide kind of what Shaq Mason was giving you, like a solid veteran on the offensive line if need be. So I understand what they're doing here. They're going with volume over capital in terms of like money. They're going with volume over the money spent on the offensive line. And Laramie Tunzel was a big problem for them last year with all the penalties. I think he led the NFL in false starts or something ridiculous. So I kind of understand that. And in terms of the defense, I think they went from like arguably the second or third best defense in the NFL last year to like the best defense in the NFL. CJ Gardner-Johnson, getting him for the 6 interception man every time he suits up for the Eagles, getting him to add that feistiness, aggressiveness to an already fast defense under D'Amico Ryans. Love that move. Ronald Darby was added to the secondary. Sheldon Rankins was added to the defensive line to replace Fatu Kazi. I think that's an upgrade. Darrell Taylor added to the defensive line depth behind Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter and Danico Autry. They also added a linebacker in the mix who's escaping my mind right now. They just recently made that addition. Diggs is gone, but they bring in Christian Kirk. Diggs missed most of last season. I think Kirk should be available more often this year. So that should be an upgrade for their wide receiver room to hold it down until Tank Dell comes back. They also added Justin Watson and Braxton Berrios to increase their special teams. So I look at the Texans as potentially a post-hype sleeper team. Potentially a team that everybody thought was going to break out last year. Everybody thought was going to make that run last year in CJ Stroud's year 2. But what if the additions they made now are really the additions that are going to make the difference in making a run? Because last year, their offensive line was in critical condition. And I think they're hoping with a good draft that they can help, boost that unit and take it from awful to decent. And then with a great defense and a good skill positions with Nico Collins, Christian Kirk, Tank Dell, Joe Mixon, Dalton Schultz, CJ Stroud, they could be one of the more all-around, well-rounded football teams in the NFL. So I think the Texans are really interesting. I kind of lean towards I like what they did, but a lot of people are kind of confused for why that happened, okay? So they swapped out the O-line for all these other moves made. Now, the Seattle Seahawks are also a team that I can understand a lot of people being on the fence about. This is a team that had 9 wins last year and was at 9 or 10, maybe even 10 wins, guys. I might be mistaken there. I think they might have won 10 games because I think they lost on the tiebreaker to the LA Rams. So this was a team in year 1 of Mike Macdonald last year, and they made a lot of decisions this offseason to take it with a different approach for the future, right? But the question is, did they get better or worse when you really break it down? Okay, so it's Geno Smith out. They get a draft pick for Geno Smith, and they sign Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was a better quarterback than Geno Smith last year, but Sam Darnold had a better offensive line, played in a dome, played with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Kevin O'Connell calling plays. Meanwhile, Geno Smith has a terrible offensive line. Yes, has good wide receivers, but really no running game and inconsistent from a play calling standpoint. So Geno has had some really good outings and really good seasons for the Seahawks. I think he's underrated. I like that addition for the Raiders. So I'm not exactly sure that Darnold and Geno, I'm not sure that's an upgrade for the Seahawks. I like Darnold inside of the Kubiak system. And I think the best thing that Seattle did this offseason is find a new offensive coordinator, that being Kubiak, who I think will add a stronger running game, and I think he'll protect Darnold well through play action pass. And I can see how Sam Darnold would fit with those players. Jackson Smith-Njigba is already an emerging receiver, but they replaced DK Metcalf with Cooper Kupp, which is definitely a downgrade, but they did get draft capital out of it. So again, They replace a player, but they get draft capital. It's debatable whether that player is better or not. I would say DK is definitely better than Cooper Kupp, while Darnold and Geno are pretty debatable. But at least they get draft capital out of it. And then you get MVS to replace Tyler Lockett. Last year, I mean, MVS was pretty good. He actually had like his best per game season of his NFL career, and he was really stressing defenses down the field inside Kubiak's offense. So he's a nice number 3. Then you've got, defensively, they didn't really do too much, but they added DeMarcus Lawrence, the Dallas Cowboy version of Lawrence, not the Giants. And he replaces Roy Robertson-Harris and Draymond Jones. So Lawrence has been injured a little bit, but he is one of the best edge setters in football. So he'll help their run defense, an area where Seattle was critically bad last year. So I could see where that would be an upgrade, what they're thinking. I'm not sure about the scheme fit, but I feel like he would be an upgrade and adds a versatile piece to their defensive front. The one area I'm very confused. So we've gone through all of this, right? So Mitch, what are you saying? Basically what I'm saying is they swapped a bunch of pieces in and out. And the question is, are they better or are they not? And the one area that they've avoided all offseason is the area that they needed to upgrade the most, that being offensive line. Their guard and center combination, their trio inside is still bad. It's not good. Right? So they have an entire draft to establish that. They have more draft capital due to the trades that they've made. But can they find those pieces to help Sam Darnold? Because as we saw, especially with interior pressure, Sam Darnold fell apart with the Vikings. So you're going to need to be able to protect him. And if you want more out of Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet on the ground, you're going to have to be able to block to run the ball. So I have my questions about Seattle, whether they got worse or better, which is why they're neutral here. But at the same time, I kind of understand for the long term, we get younger at quarterback. We want to have a Mike McDonald style team. We'll bring in a new offensive coordinator with a new influence, and we're going to try to increase our strength on defense and build our offensive line through the draft. So I understand what they're doing, and I'm just not sure that they got better. Then you have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are also neutral in my opinion, because I think people cautiously optimistic would be the way to put it. Now, it does appear that Aaron Rodgers is going to be the quarterback on this team. That being said, Aaron Rodgers, just by his nature alone, is very, 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 very divisive. Let's just say. Some fans love him. Some fans hate him. Aaron Rodgers, I think, was a little bit better than most people think last year. Right. And I think that's indicated through some of his advanced analytics, like big time throws, turnover worthy plays. He was 4th best in turnover worthy plays. He was 10th best in big time throws. Late last season, he seemed to perform better and better and got healthier. Right. But Aaron Rodgers was throwing the ball to DK Metcalf, I think yesterday, working out with DK Metcalf. So it does appear that DK Metcalf, being the biggest addition the Steelers have made so far this offseason to fix their wide receiver issue, because they had literally no depth behind George Pickens. Now they have 2 of the craziest wide receivers, literally physically and mentally, in the entire NFL on the same team. So I'm really excited to see how that all works out. But again, cautiously optimistic, because having 2 freaky athletes that are also a little bit on edge at all times on the field and can throw a temper tantrum at any minute. Mike Tomlin, he's living on the edge. You could see him sweating at the league meetings. There's a reason for that. He is a little bit uncomfortable with the current status of his quarterback situation, with Aaron Rodgers leaving him out to dry, and with this wide receiver room. If they don't have Aaron Rodgers and Mason Rudolph's throwing them the ball, oh my goodness, that's not going to be good. So I think Aaron Rodgers would make the Steelers back to being a playoff team, which currently I don't believe they are without him. I do wonder if Aaron Rodgers, though, has anything left and if he's able to sustain behind an offensive line that might be the weakest area of the Steelers football team. But he will have options to throw to. He'll have a better culture, a better coach to rely on, a good defense that's consistently making plays, creating sacks and turnovers to help him out. And the thing about Rodgers going to the Steelers, unlike going to the Jets, is that he'll be joining a team and a strong, solidified culture. While going to the Jets, he was trying to play Superman, the savior, which was never going to happen, especially at his age. So, Tom Brady kind of spoiled us in that manner. But I feel like this is the last chance with TJ Watt and Cam Hayward together. This is the last chance for Mike Tomlin to really do something, because I feel like his limit on his regime in Pittsburgh It's about capped. I mean, this guy has not won a playoff game since 2016. He's got to do something, and he's got to do something fast, or else he's going to be gone and they're going to start fresh. So this is their last opportunity to make it work. So I totally understand why they're going after Aaron Rodgers, as he is basically the low-cost, high-reward option that Russell Wilson was last offseason. But I think Rodgers is probably even a little bit better. He can bring, a little bit more rhythm and timing to this offense that they were really missing last year. So, yeah, I mean, you also add Darius Slay. You add Juan Thornhill to an already good defense to solidify the secondary. You bring in a CB2 like Slay with playoff and Super Bowl experience to complement Joey Porter Jr. That's beautiful. Thornhill's underrated as a free safety. That will complement Minkah Fitzpatrick and Elliott and the rest of the room. And, they have the most money spent on defense in the entire NFL. It's time to make it count, like at a certain point. So those are the neutral teams. Now, the bad teams, or the bad vibed teams, in my opinion, we've got 3 for you here. First, we're going to go with the Kansas City Chiefs. Now it's time to talk about the Chiefs. And it's pretty simple as to why the Chiefs are under the bad vibe category. I mean, they suffered a humiliating defeat in the Super Bowl. It was one of the worst Super Bowl losses, if not the worst Super Bowl loss I've ever seen. It was pure domination. So they went from on the edge of a three-peat to humiliated. And they went from Patrick Mahomes discussed in the same discussion with Tom Brady and the Chiefs in the same discussion with the Patriots dynasty to nobody's talking about that anymore. Like that's basically what happened. That is the shift in energy. That's the shift in the vibe. And all of a sudden the Chiefs were exposed in the Super Bowl and they became human in the Super Bowl. Now they don't have that aura of invincibility entering next season, right? And they were very fortunate to win a lot of games last year, as we know, right? They won, 9 one-score games, if not even more? I mean, every single game they won, it felt like they won a one-score game. Even in the AFC Championship, there were a spotty fourth down spot, literally, away from losing potentially that game at home. So I don't know. I look at the Chiefs and I feel like Mahomes has played worse the last 2 years than he's ever played in his career. And it feels like he's regressed since the peak of 2022, in my opinion, where he won the MVP and the Super Bowl MVP and the Super Bowl in the same season. It was one of the greatest quarterback seasons of all time. And the last 2 years, he's been not great. I mean, objectively not a top 3 quarterback the last 2 years. So Mahomes is kind of starting to slip, right? The offensive line, a little bit in shambles, right? Their left tackle position is still a question despite signing Jalen Moore from the San Francisco 49ers because he doesn't have a lot of experience. I think he has upside, but not a lot of experience. Their left guard, they lose Joe Thuney. I talked about how he's a future Hall of Famer. It speaks for itself, right? Their wide receiving core, I mean, Worthy already got in trouble. It feels like this team can't stay out of trouble, right? Then Travis Kelce's only getting older. Chris Jones is only getting older. Their defensive line is a little thinner, right? They lost a couple pieces like Tershawn Wharton to Carolina. Their secondary might be a little bit improved with Christian Fulton, but I don't think that they really improved their team. And speaking of their secondary, they did lose Justin Reed at safety. So the question is are they losing their top spot as the top team, as the reigning dynasty, as the team to beat? And it feels like they are. So that's why they're bad vibed. And you have to add on the Super Bowl hangover potential that exists with a team that is coming off a humiliation in February. So I've got the Chiefs in the bad category. Now, the second team that I think has bad vibes, and this feels like it's been permanent for a minute, and that's the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys have downright dreadful vibes. And it's because I don't know if anyone knows what the Dallas Cowboys are doing. Jerry Jones constantly claims that they're going to go all in, that they're going to be aggressive, or what was it? Cautiously aggressive. He said something like he's going to pick his spots. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he said something hilarious because you knew he was lying through his teeth. But does anyone know what the Dallas Cowboys are really doing? They don't spend any money in free agency, not at all. They don't spend any money in free agency. And they count way too much on the draft. Every single year, they count way too much on the draft. And the problem in Dallas is that they've missed on the last couple draft classes, it feels like. They have not hit at the same rate as they typically do, especially, in my opinion, in the first round. The last 2 years, it's been a little bit more suspect in that regard. They lose two leaders of their last era, Zach Martin on offense and DeMarcus Lawrence on defense. Zach Martin is going to be hard to replace, especially. They also lost the replacement for DeMarcus Lawrence, Chauncey Golston, to the Giants, a division foe. They lost their nickel corner, Jordan Lewis. He's gone. They replaced Rico Dowdle, a 1,000-yard back for them last year, who they could have got back for cheap, with Javonte Williams, who feels like he's washed, and Miles Sanders, who's definitely washed. So I don't understand what they're doing at running back. They're just creating more holes for their football team. And they're seemingly going out and trading for and signing every first-round bust that they possibly can get their hands on. Solomon Thomas, right? Peyton Turner, first-round bust of the Saints. Solomon Thomas, Niners, right? And then he was playing on the Jets recently. Kenneth Murray from the Titans, who actually I thought played decent for the Titans, but he can't stop the run for the life of him. All these players on defense they signed can't stop the run, which is their biggest flaw. Right? They add Jack Sanborn for Eric Kendricks, which I think is a downgrade. Khair Elam, who might be the worst corner in the league. They traded for him. He didn't even know. He was running around in circles trying to cover Worthy in the AFC Championship. They have no wide receiver too. They lost Brandon Cooks. I mean, this team just added way more holes. Your goal in free agency is to be able to plug holes so that you don't have needs in the draft. Right? That's the goal of free agency. What did New England do? We're going to sign a corner, so we don't need that as much. We're going to sign a linebacker, multiple linebackers, so we don't need that as much. We're going to sign an edge rusher, so we don't need that as much. We're going to sign a D tackle. You get the point, right? We're going to get Stephon Diggs, so we don't have to pick a receiver at 4. You know, that's what you do in free agency. Dallas is like, nah, we're going to do the opposite. We'll sign bust after bust after bust, and somehow we're going to coach them up, and they're going to be really good. Good luck with that. The only move I really loved from Dallas was they got back Dante Fowler, who they stole from the Commanders. He had over 10 and a half sacks. I think he had 10 plus sacks last year. So that's a nice compliment for Micah Parsons. But he is an undersized defensive end who also struggles against the run. So I don't know how they're going to stop the run. But regardless, Dallas is definitely down bad. They suck. Now, the San Francisco 49ers are the final team in this video. I think the 49ers also have bad vibes. They're explainable bad vibes, and we'll explain it, but it's bad vibes, okay? Because they've gone from arguably the most talented, coveted, intimidating roster in the NFL to what is this defensive line? Like, most people could not name a single person on their defensive line, not name Nick Bosa. So it's a lot different, you know, from the days where they were at. You know what I'm saying? So San Francisco still has studs. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, McCaffrey's returning. George Kittle's still probably the best tight end in football. Brandon Ayuk's back, right? I like Ricky Pearsall and Jawan Jennings and Trent Williams. And I don't know if I said Fred Warner, but he's a stud. Nick Bosa, right? They still got a lot of players. And then even some of their younger guys are promising, right? Like Dominic Pooney at right guard. They've got good football players, and they're still in the conversation for the playoffs. But when you're talking about teams that objectively got worse, like, there's no debating that losing your left guard and not replacing him in Aaron Banks, that's an L. Like, trading Debo actually is probably the more like overrated move, like, because they do have Jawan Jennings, Brandon Ayuk, and Ricky Pearsall. So I'm not too concerned about that. But, you know, getting rid of or not retaining Dre Greenlaw, him actually choosing to go to Denver over staying with the Niners, that's a big loss, because Greenlaw has been an animal and, you know, one of those guys that brings that spirit to that defense. And Robert Saleh returns, so he wants those linebackers to have that aggression inside his defense. Hufanga, another one of those like Niner players that you would watch San Francisco. It's like their defense is so fast, so physical. They're all over the place. That's Hufanga energy, right? You lose Charvarius Ward, a very well-established, good cornerback. Now, the thing that I could spin it into here is that the Niners they're trying to get younger. They have the most draft picks in this draft, so they're going to have an opportunity. They also have a much better draft pick than they typically have at 11th overall, so they'll be able to establish whether the offensive front, the offensive line, or the defensive line with a pick at 11, you would think, okay? And also, They cut guys like Malik Collins and Leonard Floyd, which for now makes them worse. But those players were making, money that they really didn't deserve based on their production. And it kind of looks like they lost some names, but they didn't really lose that much talent. So that's where it's like, it's bad vibes because the fan base is up in arms. The fan base is like, the house is on fire. Like they don't know what to do. There's rumors about the ownership and the money people in San Francisco holding back Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch from making money-making moves. Like there's crazy stuff, reports going on in San Francisco. So yeah, San Francisco certainly for now has gotten worse, but I think for the long term, it's about getting younger and getting fresh. And last year was sort of a reset season with all of the injuries that they sustained after the Super Bowl appearance. So those are the good, the bad, and the ugly in terms of vibes in the NFL. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let's just check the chat right now, just real quick before we end. Just to recap, as you guys can see on the screen, the good, the Patriots, the Bears, the Giants, the bad, the Chiefs, the Cowboys, the Niners, and the neutral, the Texans, the Seahawks, and the Steelers. Plenty of O-linemen coming out of the draft, says Negan. I assume he's talking about the Chiefs. Rock says that I don't know ball. Kenny Pickett is the only answer. If you think Kenny Pickett's good at quarterback, then you don't know ball, sir. Unknown Raider guy says Jackson Dart will be a good selection. I just released my quarterback rankings on my channel, The Bottom Line View, if you guys want to check that out. Yeah, he's interesting. I don't know how high he'll go. I would think that he probably goes in the second round. The Raiders would be smart if they draft a quarterback in the second round. I think that is fairly likely, a mid-round pick at quarterback for the Raiders. The Raiders could have been a team I could have put in the good vibes category. The Ravens better trade up in the first round. The Ravens haven't really done anything to really be put in any category, to be fair. It feels like they're the same team. The Rams could have been put in good vibes. I would circle that from Liam there for sure. Otherwise, thank you guys for watching. Appreciate everybody tuning in and joining the chat. And it's been Mitch, the good, the bad, the ugly. We'll see if the vibes change in the NFL draft. Peace.